Hello and welcome to the Switchrpg podcast. I am one of your hosts, Gio, and I'm joined by Just Johnny. How you doing, buddy?
Yo, I'm doing good.
He's doing way too good. If this is your first time listening to the show from Switchrpg, where we bring you all the latest in the world of RPGs on the Nintendo Switch, he is still dancing. This week, we are talking about my favorite Divinity Original Sin for a brief moment. Yep. And then also we have a topic that I wanted to kind of bring up from, I think it was the last episode, where you mentioned something to the fact that Final Fantasy isn't really an RPG.
Oh, no,
that's okay.
You were putting words in my mouth, although some of those words did come out of my mouth. But it was more of a structure type of issue.
Okay, well, we're going to get into a little bit of that. Kind of. Anyway, again, everybody, we want you to take a look at our Twitter. We have the Switchrpg Awards for 2019. Right now, as of this recording, we have best turn-based. We have a poll on Twitter for best turn-based, and that has Dragon Quest XI-S in a landslide right now.
Yeah, I mean, would Fire Emblem count as turn-based?
It could.
It wasn't in the poll.
No, it wasn't in the poll. I mean, we are also limited to 4. Yeah. Okay.
I guess we have to give something to Dragon Quest because we know Fire Emblem's going to sweep everything else.
Well, it's a possibility. We'll see.
Other than graphics.
Right. So, I mean, how we're doing it is we're going genre, I guess, subgenre by subgenre every week. And I think next, by the time this comes out, is best tactical RPG. And then there you have your Fire Emblem.
Yes.
So, again, keep an eye on our Twitter. We have polls constantly going out about the Switchrpg Awards. Also, don't forget, we have Patreon and merch. You can find that stuff on our website at switchrpg.com. Also wanted to shout out to some of our patrons. Hedge Knight Mike, Sprinklins, DJ Atkins, Michael C., and I'm going to call, is this SQL Violist? Violist?
I'm going to call it Sequel Violist.
You know what? I was going to bring my nerd brain into this. So sure. Yeah, we'll call it Sequel Violist. Mm-hmm. What are you playing right now?
What I've been playing. So, I don't know. I can't remember if there was an embargo, but I doubt it.
Oh boy.
Because it's a beta. It was like a very testy thing. And I think it's open to like other people to play. So it's not
beta demo type of thing.
There's already been like previews written up elsewhere. So I've been playing, I played the beta. It's very limited for Yes, Your Grace. It was on PC. It's a pixelated RPG managed, kind of like a simulation, a king simulation game, I guess. You are a king. You are making decisions. You're getting visits from random people, commoners, and like your own family members. You have to sort of see to like different issues that come your way. They're making requests like, "Oh, my money got stolen. Can you compensate me?" Or bankers come up to you and be like, "Hey, you need a loan for all these requests that are coming your way?" Or you have to like deal with your family members. You have 3 daughters, and each of them have various different things going on.
Is that sort of randomized, or is it constantly?
Oh no, it's definitely not randomized. Okay. It's I mean, I don't know what the end game is going to be like, but it's not randomized because a lot of the things that happen are happening, and it's tied to the story of the game itself. Okay. So it does relate to your family. So a lot of the decisions you're making is kind of well, I don't want to say they're actually decisions, because some of the things I wanted to do, I got forced against it. Like there was like a predefined scripted path that I had to go down, and I had to do those things. But in other things, you do have some decisions that you can influence and all that. There's like these little raiding groups that are like invading, or they're going to war with you. I mean, there could have been better ways of handling it. I don't want to spoil anything about the story, But it ends in a major part. It's very reminiscent of like something that happens in Game of Thrones.
All right.
And that's where it ends. The beta part ends, and it definitely leaves you hanging for more. I was very interested in it. I was in the groove of it, getting these audiences and being like, all right, you need some more cattle. Here's some supplies.
Some cattle.
So yeah, have some cattle, or you start hiring generals to make up your army. You have a couple of different resources, like what was it? It was gold supply, army, like your army power. There was another one, I forgot what it was. And then there's like 3 sub things or 4 sub things where you have generals, which is separate from your army power. And then you have like witches, which I never got control of. You have a limited number of pigeon couriers that you can send. So you can like request an audience from like various nobility or other kings and queens and whatnot.
Instead of ravens, we're using pigeons.
Yeah. There wasn't any fantasy elements to it that I encountered during that part, but the way things played out, it doesn't seem like there won't be fantasy elements to it. But right now, it seems like it's much more, realistic simulation RPG style thing. So that was pretty cool.
Something that easily could be on the Switch, probably.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I can definitely see it going on the Switch. Another game I played was Legend of Keepers. This is, if I had to sum it up, it's like Slay the Spire.
So it's a card game?
It's
card collecting?
You're collecting monsters instead of cards. You are, it's very comical. You are the protector. You are like the security enforcement boss for a dungeon. So you're sort of tasked with protecting the loot that's in the dungeon from the pesky heroes that are coming in to raid it. So you're setting up traps, you're setting up monsters for the heroes to fight, and then eventually you are the end boss.
Oh,
so you're fighting against the heroes. So you're using the monster abilities instead of using the hero abilities, and then you get rewarded for defending the thing. So it's got that sort of mix and repeat loop to it. It's very short loop, and then there's the meta game is you're sort of doing the more managerial side of things, building up your monsters, leveling them up, leveling up your own abilities, acquiring gear, stuff like that.
All right.
Managing resources.
It reminds me of I actually have it's a card game. I think it's a boss dungeon, or it's a I'm gonna have to look it up now.
Yep.
But it reminds me of that game.
Yeah, it's that was also Legend of Keepers is also a demo that I played, which is available on PC on Steam, and I can easily see it making its way over to the Switch. It's yet another pixelated pixel art style game, so it's not going to tax the Switch whatsoever. It's got a very tight pick up and play loop. You can get through sort of setting up your dungeon and defending it within like 5 minutes. It's like very bite sized, so it's a perfect game for the Switch.
Yeah, and Boss Monster is the game I was thinking about. It's very similar to what you're talking about. You build your own dungeon and layout, and you're stopping all these heroes from coming in. It's actually, like I said, it's the same. Reminds me very much of that game.
Yep. Yeah, so that's that, and then beyond that, on the Switch, I'm playing more Fire Emblem and Smash.
You're never going to finish Fire Emblem.
I'm never going to finish it. I'm like 140 hours into it right now.
On like the hardest difficulty.
Not the hardest.
One of the hardest.
Second to hardest.
Second to hardest. Yeah. Trying to get everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, forget it. You're going to be like 250 hours into that.
I'm getting so close. I'm at chapter 19, I think.
Of 22?
Of 22, yeah.
Oh, boy.
Either 18 or 19.
Well, I guess you're getting there.
I am getting there.
You are getting there. All right.
And stuff's hitting the fan on that game. So what are you playing?
I am playing Children of Morta.
I
am absolutely in love with that game.
Yeah.
I love the music in it. I love the art style. Even though it's just, it's just pixelated bit graphics, I think the colors that they use and the color palette that they use is phenomenal.
Yeah. I
typically don't like roguelikes, but this is a roguelite. So it's in the same vein where you have to kind of rinse, repeat your playthroughs, your dungeon runs, but it doesn't feel like you'll lose everything you've made progress with.
Yeah.
So, and I think you kind of mentioned that. So your gold carries over. Everything you basically collect, except for some certain skills that you get in that run, those don't follow you. But your gold does, your level ups do, all your skills, your family skills. Like it's a fun game to play.
You're always getting progress. It's
right,
like,
and that's the thing. I feel like I'm always one step closer, closer. I don't feel like I'm ever falling back. And
it's a lot like Dead Cells in the way that Dead Cells, you feel like you're always making progress because you're always collecting more cells with each run, which will eventually allow you to unlock more stuff, more weapons or abilities, what have you, which is sort of the big meta progress. But in Children of Morta, that meta progress is way more lenient. You actually make way more progress than what you would in a single Dead Cells run.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like the fact that you can level up your individual character, whoever you choose, and then also your family also has level ups in that progress.
And they synergize with one another. Yeah. And another thing about that sort of loop is that you're doing a dungeon, which is about 4 floors worth. And then once you're done with that, you unlock the next dungeon, and you don't have to repeat that same dungeon prior. You can move on to the next one, or do more runs on the previous one.
And that's kind of what I do in some instances where I get to the next dungeon. I'm like, oh wow, I really need to kind of level my dude up, and I'm just having so much fun with that game. I recommend that game to everyone.
Did you do any multiplayer in that game?
I haven't been able to. No.
Okay.
And I believe it's only local.
Yep. Right.
Because I want to know what that feels like. But no. And I think that's kind of a hidden feature on that. I don't know that many people know that is a multiplayer game or co-op game. But yeah, Children of Morta, I can't recommend that game enough. I absolutely love that game. Still playing Divinity Original Sin 2. My most favorite game ever.
For the second playthrough?
This is my third playthrough.
Okay.
I mean, there's just so many options.
Yeah, I can be the Red King.
I could be I could go with the origin characters, whoever they are, the Divinity characters, or I can make my own. They can be anything I want them to be. It's just, I mean, the story is kind of the similar, but I mean, the play style is just, it can range from whatever to whatever I want.
And they got such a great combat system with the sort of leaving the elemental pools of stuff and then being able to manipulate those, sort of like you're constantly flooding the battlefield with different traps that either you or the enemy could set off.
And you can set it off and be in the trap, or you can make the trap, and as soon as you, like, before you know it, you've been teleported in there, you've been swapped.
Backfires on you.
Yeah, it could easily. But I love the environmental changes in the, like you had mentioned, the battlefield. The traversal is all there, so height advantages always matter. Absolutely love that game. Absolutely love it. Also starting to play a new game called Narcos: Rise of the Cartels. It's kind of another tactical RPG, similar to sort of maybe Wasteland 2, that sort of stuff. Nothing really phenomenal there. It is really big. It's based off the show, so they actually show footage of the show in the game.
Okay, so it's a modern day, or did Narcos take place, what, 70s?
Yeah, it's in the 70s. So when, I guess, drugs really took
the war on drugs thing.
Yeah, the war on drugs thing.
Yeah.
So it's from the show. And I'm not familiar with the show at all, so I'm really kind of lost in that aspect. But it's interesting. It's interesting. So yeah, moving on to news. We were just talking about this. Divinity Original Sin 2 is getting a physical release from Limited Run Games. Count me in. This will be probably my fourth buy-in for this game. Whatever. I don't care. I'm getting it.
If they ever enable cross-play between PC and the Switch, because I know they have cross-save.
Right, cross-save, not cross-play.
If they ever do cross-play, that would be a surefire way for me to get this, because right now my girlfriend and I are playing through Divinity and Divinity 2 taking a while.
Yeah, sure.
But also her PC is kind of crapping out.
Yeah.
So we need another platform, whether it be another PC or on the Switch if they have crossplay.
Yeah, well, the Switch is also lacking some other features as well. It doesn't have the Dungeon Master mode, which I've always wanted to try.
What is that? Never heard of that.
You've never heard of the? I think it's called Game Master.
Oh, okay. That's one where you can like create your own campaigns, your own storyline.
Yeah, it would probably take a lot of work to set up and whatnot, but yeah, that's a feature in there. If you're into that sort of stuff, you could spend hours on that. Moving on. Now I know you would never do this to me, but a man spends $1.4 million on a game character. So this isn't in Japan. Japan or China.
Let's see here. China.
Okay, so he spends $1.4 million on a game character. So this is kind of collectively. This is an MMO. I think it's called Justice something. It's a game I've never really even heard of, but it's probably very popular.
Justice Online.
All right. $1.4 million on a character, and his friend accidentally sells it for $552.
So you say this isn't something that I would do. I actually did do something like this.
You did not.
I did, yeah. I did. So the way I did it first, though, was I sold my character. So I sold my WoW character, my WoW account, for, I don't know, right around $400 or $600.
Did you have, like, how many characters did you have in that account?
So I was the only, or one of the very few, this is during Vanilla WoW, I was one of the very few Feral Druids before Feral Druid was an actual build that you could do.
Okay.
I was one of the very few that were doing Feral Druid without there being like, without anyone recognizing that it was good. So that allowed me to sell the account for because it was only that and like a couple of other minor characters. The Feral Druid was my main character, and I sold it. And then the Burning Crusade came out. That expansion came out, I don't know, a year or so later, and then I rebought my same account. So I bought back my account for the same amount of money. So it was kind of a wash. Sure. I didn't make anything. I didn't lose anything. So, but
I
did dabble in buying and selling.
Okay, well, I guess his friend he was selling it, but he made a typo. So he was trying to sell it for
big typo.
Yeah, he was trying to sell it for 388,000 won. Yuan? I'm not sure of the currency, but he ended up putting it for 3,888, which is a substantial difference. But either way, this all went to court. He ended up getting his account back, whatever, but he ended up having to pay not the friend, but the person the original owner of the account had to pay court fees and all that stuff, equaling about $20,000.
Wow.
So here's the thing. You have $1.4 million invested in a game or a game character. I mean, it's time to maybe put down the mouse and keyboard. Well,
it depends, right? If you have that money to spend.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
and
right.
So I see this as a highlight of the issues for why I don't play MMOs anymore and games that have sort of microtransactions that are designed with microtransactions in mind, because they do take advantage of you. And they took advantage of this 1.4 million spender. Mm-hmm. But yes, they are at fault. They should have quit. But these games, addictive stuff is real. Yeah. And I'm okay with these things being in there, right? I'm okay. Like I don't mind having, prey tactics. I don't mind to a certain degree, right? I still poo-poo it. I still be like, no, you shouldn't do that. And I'll still say it's bad and wrong, but I'm not going to push for any kind of government regulations.
No, I'm not getting that far. I don't think there needs to be any governmental regulations on things like that.
But this is a good example, right? If anyone wanted to use this type of story as, look at how bad it can get, where one person is paying $1.4 million on worthless digital stuff.
Right.
On a server that will eventually, because it happens to every MMO, they eventually will turn off the servers. Like, who knows how many years it'll take, but 5 years or less, maybe a little bit longer if the guy's lucky, but all that money will go wasted.
Gone. Yep.
Not gone. I mean, it goes to the developers. Developers help keep things running.
But I mean, it's essentially out of his hands.
Yeah.
It's not in his hands at all.
Yeah, it's an extreme case. It's a headline grabber. I mean, this was reported on Kotaku and, you know.
Moving right along.
It's a little baby. Just a little.
Just a little baby.
Yeah.
CD Projekt Red credits a 38% boost in their revenue a year.
Their year-over-year revenue.
Year-over-year. My reading is not so good today. Yep. In part to The Witcher 3 on the Switch.
Yeah, well, duh. They released less than a game a year.
Yeah, wasn't that their last game they released?
Well, I don't know if you count the card games.
Gwent.
Well, yeah, they did standalone Gwent stuff, and
right. I mean, they essentially already had that.
Isn't there another sort of smaller bite-sized? I could be thinking of Pathfinder, but there's like these smaller bite-sized Witcher games. Oh, it's like an adventure. I think it's like an adventure type game. I could be wrong. But I know at the very least Gwent is another
right. I mean, Gwent
offshoot.
Gwent is already in the game, so how much time do they really have to invest in that?
They do have Gwent as its own standalone thing. So
right.
Pushing that. So, but yeah, so a big 38% boost in year-over-year sales, like shocker, of course, because if they don't sell anything periodically, right? They're not a publisher, they're a developer. Their turnover of new major games is like once every 5 years.
Right.
So, The Witcher 3 being a fantastic game is selling every year, right? It is still
right, but progressively slower up until
slow and slower, and then it gets the Switch bump. Mm-hmm. So to me, this isn't really news. This is like common sense.
No, it is common sense, but it's nice to see that it's happening because I mean, I want more from other developers and publishers to put their stuff on the Switch because it'll sell, if it's decent quality.
Yeah, it is reassuring that the CD Projekt Red people are actually reporting this, which shows their enthusiasm for the boost of sales. I don't think I doubt it's like a dramatically huge increase in sales, but I would say they definitely made their money worth because for one, they're releasing, this information. They're enthusiastic about it. And 38%, that's double-digit growth.
That's nothing to
that
sneeze
is
at,
good.
right?
Yeah, any company would love to have double-digit growth for a quarter.
Right. Moving on again. Rumor. I don't like to discuss rumors. It can make you look bad.
Yeah.
I don't like to look bad.
All right, so one half of these rumors is definitely pretty solid. This has been rumored for like years. Reggie teased this thing at the VGAs.
He did.
Like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Where he wore a Metroid Prime t-shirt.
He wore a shirt. That's all he did. That's not a tease.
That's a tease. Because, what was it? The major CEO, whatever type of the faces of Microsoft or Sony or Nintendo have been doing this quite often. Remember Phil Spencer wearing Battletoads shirt?
Okay.
At E3 years ago, and all of a sudden now Battletoads is a thing that's coming out very soon-ish, maybe.
That game, that game is so difficult. Yeah. Battletoads. Anyway, so yeah, you're taking, I guess.
Oh yeah, so the rumor is Metroid Prime Trilogy coming to the Switch. This has me excited because I have Metroid Prime Trilogy, but you have to use the Wii controls, the motion stuff.
Terrible.
It's not terrible. It's just I actually prefer that control system over standard.
Like a traditional.
But only slightly. And it's only when it's done very well, like in Metroid Prime 3.
Okay.
Now, the other Metroid Prime games don't utilize that motion control. It has it implemented, but it doesn't the free aim ability doesn't really affect the gameplay. In Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, you had to aim at certain parts of enemies that you were targeting. So you would lock onto them, and that would snap your view to like their center of mass, and that's where you're aiming. And then you could free aim outside of that lock on, and that created very interesting gameplay, combat gameplay mechanics. And when they ported that over to Metroid Prime 1 and 2, well, those don't have that kind of enemy types to be exposed to or require that level of free aiming. So it was kind of pointless in those games. So in Metroid Prime 3, I thought it was preferred. And the other ones, I would prefer regular traditional controls because that's how the games were made. But if they were redesigned with the free aiming in mind, then I'd prefer that. Either way, certainly they're going to do standard controls for the entire trilogy.
I would say they'd have to. And they could have some quality of life improvements. Maybe they do change something up and utilizing the Joy-Cons and their motion control ability.
Yeah, I would say the best of both, right? They'll give it like the Splatoon treatment of motion control or Zelda style. Because I actually love the motion controls with Breath of the Wild. I don't know if you played with that enabled.
No.
You disabled that?
Oh, yeah.
It was so good.
No, I am an anti-motion control guy. I'm just too old for this. I don't want to move.
Well, I think the way they do it is probably the best way to do it in that most of your aiming, your big major aiming from left to right, up and down is going to be done on the stick. And then when you want to hone in the finer precision aiming, you do that with the motion. Yeah. Because it only requires very subtle movement.
Yeah, I just couldn't. Even when you had to do in Breath of the Wild, when you had to do the puzzles, and you had to manipulate the giant cube and everything.
That I understand. I'm talking about like
that was frustrating to like if you're playing handheld, like you have to rotate that screen like that. Yeah, it's impossible.
That falls in line with like gimmicky, where it's unnecessary.
Right.
Whereas when it came to
we got this cool thing we can do,
but when it came to like aiming the bow and arrow, that actually felt really good to sort of have that level of precision.
Sure.
Beyond what the right thumbstick would offer.
Yeah, no.
There's another parts of this rumor though that is more of a surprise.
What's that?
So Trilogy, we've known about this for 2 years, right? A lot of rumors about that. This new one is the one that's like surprising, and that is they are potentially remaking Super Metroid, aka the greatest game of all time,
the best Metroid.
Yeah. Well, yes.
I like Super Metroid. I mean, I'm sure it has its problems with modern as modern gaming is concerned.
No, that game's everlasting. It
perfect.
Holds up.
It's perfect.
It's perfect.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, Super Metroid's perfect.
All right, I'm going to agree with you. Yeah. I know that some people have complaints about it, but
but
people complain about everything.
Sure. But they can be wrong. They can be very, very wrong.
Right.
And all right, so this is a rumor, right? And it's speculation, and the VGA awards are coming up.
All right. Yep.
Potentially, we'll hear something about it.
I really hope we do hear something.
But this makes sense to me because look at the last remake, not Zelda,
Return of
for Metroid, which was Samus Returns.
Okay.
And that was done by Mercury Steam.
All right.
They've been quiet.
They've
been very quiet.
Uh-huh.
And they've already remade a Metroid game, a 2D Metroid game.
So they're just like, why not? Right? Just keep going.
Okay. What else have they been working on? And the games prior to that were Metroidvania.
All right. Okay.
Because they were Castlevania games that they did before that. And when it comes to doing,
maybe they'll do a Castlevania game instead.
Well, they've already done that and ruined it.
Which one was that?
All of them.
All
of them.
And you want them making a Super Metroid remake.
They did fantastic on Samus Returns.
I agree. I'm going to agree with that.
Absolutely fantastic. That game is phenomenal. And that was a remake that I really appreciated because not only did they, remake it, they reimagined what it could be and brought up to modern standards and added the much needed combat, the parry mechanic that they added in there, the full 360 free aiming, right? They really added more to it beyond just remaking it, unlike Link's Awakening, right? Which was more so a tried and true. Samus Returns was definitely honoring what was there, but also
improve.
adding the things, improving on what was there before. So.
Yeah, and that was my biggest complaints with Link's Awakening, is that they did all this. They made it look beautiful, but it really needed some upkeep, and they didn't do it at all.
Right, and that could fall in line with maybe they thought it didn't need to have too many of those awe-inspiring or too many of those updates that brings it up to speed, because it's already a fantastic game.
Sure.
So maybe that's why. But Super Metroid, remaking that.
You don't have to do anything, right?
You don't. Well, I've already played that game so many times, so they probably should. I must have beaten that game.
Maybe change it up a little bit. Maybe, I don't know, add a few missions or add a mission or something.
Well, that is part of the rumor, is that they are going to sort of add some nuanced, newer-ish things. It's still going to be a 2D side-scroll, but it's probably going to have the 3D graphics like the remake for Metroid 2. And they're probably going to throw in there, because they already have it done, the free aiming, that parry system to make the combat a bit more actiony, a bit more fluid, rather than being rather stale and static. Now, the combat in Super Metroid isn't that static. It's pretty good, but if you give it that little return of Samus,
I think if you add that flair, it'll be good.
It'll really shine.
Yeah.
So I am super excited.
You're all in on this one, huh?
Oh, Metroid's one of my favorite game series of all time.
Right.
So, and they're remaking the best of the series, and one of the best games of all time.
Potentially. It's all rumor. It's all rumors.
This one, I have a strong feeling it is actually happening, because there was another rumor from...
Oh boy! This episode's sponsored by the Rumor Mill.
Well, there are rumors about these Metroid games being made, and there was a rumor about Samus Returns being made by this team that was leaked.
So predated the actual release.
It predated the actual release of the game many years, like a full year prior to the announcement that it was going to come out.
So this could be we could be a few years out from this then.
So it wasn't.
You can't wait that long.
This wasn't leaked by the same person, but you're
gonna explode.
To me, this is kind of like this is definitely happening, because Nintendo is still so early on Metroid Prime 4. They need something to satiate the fans,
to fill it in. Yeah,
and just doing Metroid Prime Trilogy won't be enough to fill in the gap, because I still think Metroid Prime 4 is like
they pretty much have to start over though with Metroid Prime 4. So
yeah, unfortunately,
hey, it is what it is.
Yeah.
All right. So next we have Elder Scrolls Blades delayed to 2020. Now, I kind of had a feeling this was going to happen, mostly because they talk about quiet. They've been quiet on this.
Yeah.
There's been nothing.
Since what, E3, right?
Since E3. This was at E3. And you know who was playing this? Nobody. Not one person was. The banks for Elder Scrolls Blades was empty.
Wow.
I don't even know if this will actually ever come out. I'm totally serious. It's a free-to-play game. It's got some microtransactions. But I really have a feeling this may never see the light of day.
Yeah, it's the cell phone, the mobile style game design, people are just, the core gamers are just tired and sick of. Yeah.
And I totally agree. This just leads to a question, like what is Bethesda doing?
Messing up.
They are just stepping in it all over the place.
Yeah.
And it's just, it seems like a common thing we talk about, but it's something that we don't want to see, because Bethesda, especially with Elder Scrolls, they have that name recognition there alone, and they're just stepping in it.
Well, all right. To be honest, the Elder Scrolls didn't start getting good until Morrowind.
Yeah, right. So the expansion, basically, of Elder Scrolls.
And Oblivion actually isn't... It's a great game, but it's not as spectacular as or up to snuff. It's a much smaller world, right? That wasn't a very big world at all. And what made that one so impressive was that it was boosting... It was showing off some pretty spectacular graphics at the time. But when it came down to the actual gameplay, It was all right. It was a watered down Morrowind gameplay wise.
Right. And I think what they're known for mostly is their story and lore. Their gameplay mechanics, I mean, their combat sequences are kind of very basic, kind of floaty. There's really not much to it, I think.
Right, but they improved on that and a whole bunch of other stuff on Skyrim. Now, Skyrim is a big deal. That was definitely their breakout hit. Right?
Yes.
That was the one that escalated the Elder Scrolls into, you know, a caliber of its own to sort of fall in line with other major RPG franchises like Mass Effect. Right?
But it's also part of their decline, in my opinion.
Yeah, because once you hit the top, the only way to go is down.
Or you can continue to go up, but they just didn't.
They didn't because they did they didn't do enough to change things up. So immediately after that was Fallout 4.
Right. Fallout 4 was good.
Yep.
Not great.
I think it was great, but it had problems.
Mm-hmm. I think getting your getting your power armor so early made it feel not special at all. Whereas in Fallout 3, when you were collecting these pieces of power armor, it was a big freaking deal.
Yeah.
But in 4, I mean, if I was to go back into my game save on 4, I had my first, is it hideout? I'm not sure what they call it. It's a gas station, right? I had power armor lined up on the roof the entire way around. It just didn't feel special.
I think the problem with 4 was they didn't change up enough of the structure of the game. It felt too much like a Skyrim. It felt too much like Fallout 3. It felt too much like New Vegas, right? At least with New Vegas, that world was way more interesting and the interactions were a bit more interesting. But in general, it didn't change enough. It added a crafting system, and that was the big change with that between all the other Fallouts, Skyrims, etc.
But was that even based on what they wanted? Wasn't it? I believe that was a mod in one of the Fallout games, and they took it basically and made it part of their game.
Well, it was a big deal in Fallout 4 because you were very much inclined to utilize it to collect the junk, break it down into the various components in order to craft. I mean, if you didn't want to do your own home base thing, which was cool, I did that. I mean, the home base stuff was pretty fun. You used it to enhance your existing weaponry, so you could add weapon mods and
different effects,
different scopes, and stuff like that.
And that was another thing.
As well as the armor,
the mods, and I think it was Fallout 3. I think 3 was the base building. That was not there. I mean, they're implementing it in 4, but that was part of the modding community. So I don't know. It's just so sad. I have this cabinet filled with Fallout and Bethesda's stuff.
I mean, might
have to clear it out.
I don't put too much faith into Elder Scrolls Blades. I mean,
no, and like I said, it's delayed to 2020. Don't be surprised if you never ever see it. Play it on your phone.
Yeah,
it works fine on your phone. All right, Daemon X Machina new patch update with some additional new content.
Yeah, they added
talk to me about this.
They added in a new boss called Zelcroa. They did some changes to some missions and sort of like balance type of stuff, and then they added in some additional gear and stuff like that. So it's like some content, boss battles. When you read the reviews for this game, now this game didn't review all that well. I was looking forward to it. It's a mech game, RPG elements. You almost had me.
I think you can consider this game almost in two parts. Because their initial release or their beta, which I was involved in, I think it's a demo, so everyone was kind of involved in that. Yep. It was okay. They improved upon it, made their release. It was okay, and then they're just consistently doing updates. And I think what we have now with this product, the end product that we have now, is a little bit better from what I've heard from people.
Yeah, it certainly is, but the problem with this game and games of this style is that they throw in nonsense quests at you.
Okay.
in order to essentially busy work. And if you ever read the reviews, everyone praised, to a certain degree, as much as you could, the boss battles. And they said essentially the boss battles of this game were the funnest parts of the game. And doing the, fighting against the typical fodder and those types of missions, not as interesting. Very mundane, just aim and shoot at these various things. So to see that they added a new content update, not only doing some balance changes and almost certainly fixing additional bugs, but inserting new content like a brand new boss fight, which is
what people really enjoyed about the game.
People said that they enjoy, yeah. So that's good and reassuring. I think it's a little bit too late. I don't see this game. I mean, as long as it's not costing the company too much time, effort, resources, etc., I think it's fine because they are catering to a very niche core crowd. I could have been part of that crowd.
Could have been it.
Could have been, but I mean, the game is fundamentally flawed in its combat system. The camera and the zipping and zooming of characters. I don't know why I'm using those words, but
zipping and zooming
of the enemies as they sort of speed through you. It's not fun to have to reorient yourself, move the camera around, re-aim at these characters that are moving way too fast. The combat was just a little bit too fast, which was fine, but they didn't do it well enough. They didn't give you enough time to react in a way that they expect you to react with having the enemies move as quickly as they did. Not all the enemies.
Yeah.
And this is why the boss fights, in my opinion, were funner than the actual mech versus mech fights, where you're fighting the faster, more nimble, agile enemies that are able to dodge and stuff like that. Because the bosses are so big and cumbersome, they stay there.
Yeah, they're stationary.
So you can unload on them for a bit, right? And you don't have to constantly reposition your camera, reposition your character, and all that stuff. So it's an issue of controls. And when you have an issue of controls in your game that has bogged down its review score, you kind of can't fix that.
Yeah, it's hard to get out of that without a whole new product.
That's the feel of the game, and if the feel of the game is mediocre, oof, that's hard.
Yeah, but like I said, they have been doing improvements, but let's see what else they have in store. You hope for them to move on here. Yeah,
I mean, if they ever do a sequel, I will pay attention. I'm not out. I'm just out for that particular game.
Okay, what's this? This is getting in shape stuff.
Yeah, Nintendo.
I'm out on this one.
So Ring Fit Adventure RPG,
yes,
on Switch, where you level up yourself in game and out of game. So apparently they ran out of copies being sold, so they kind of underproduced, and this game oversold their clearly oversold their expectations.
Right.
To how much? That'll be interesting to find out.
This is in Japan, right?
Yeah, Japan.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe they just didn't. Maybe they underproduced it. They're like, we don't want to put out all these peripherals if no one's going to buy them. They're going to sit on a shelf.
Yeah.
So that could be a little bit of that.
And that has happened. So this is probably them undercutting it because they already did a hardware type of SKU with the Labo stuff.
Oh yeah, yep.
And they probably overestimated
they overproduced
the Labo.
That, yeah.
And to compensate, they underestimated for Ring Fit Adventure, and lo and behold, it's the phrasing that I see here is severe stock shortages. So severe. So they didn't undercut this by a little. They undercut this by a lot.
Right.
But when you look at the sales numbers, the game is over 250,000 in Japan, or right around 250,000. That's not a little.
That's a lot.
That is a lot.
That is a lot. A ton.
And to say that they have severe shortages, wow. Kudos to them for making a game that can slightly tickle the fancy of Wii Fit.
That's definitely what it is. Yeah. Except you're not dealing with senior citizens trying to bowl.
Not yet.
You're dealing with millennials trying to stay in shape, because I am not doing it.
Yeah, I mean, if they didn't present this as if they presented this as a more serious, tried and true fitness game, being the Switch popularity that it is, I could only imagine that would have been one of the hot ticket items for this holiday season.
Sure, yeah, and I say millennials. I'm only kidding. Okay, I'm only joking. All right. Yeah, so really, really interesting. I didn't think something like this would do well at all.
Yeah, talk about niche.
Yeah.
It's a non-core, brand new franchise, non-core RPG, like very casual RPG, where it has a peripheral, and you have to physically work out in order to play the game.
And I've heard a lot of stories about people utilizing this to kind of get in shape, and they say it's kind of a workout or stay in shape.
Yeah.
So really cool.
Yeah,
really cool. Just not for me. Stardew Valley has an incoming large content update. These guys just keep putting updates into this game. Are they ever going to make anything new?
This game is still showing up in the top of the charts
forever
on the Switch, on the eShop. It's if you ever go into the digital only, this game is showing up there every single time I check it. It's just there regardless of whether there's a sale on it. It's insane how
I don't know that there has ever been a sale on it. It's not been necessary.
No, like,
I'm sure it's been on sale, but
kudos to them, man. They just made one of the best selling. This is one of the best selling Switch games of all time, right?
Is it?
It's up there. It's definitely if I had to guess, it's easily in the top 20.
Yes, I would have to agree with you.
And I'm talking about copies sold. I'm not talking about like total revenue, because this is
it's a budget game.
What was it, like a 15 or 20?
I think 15 sounds right. Yeah.
So they added in a bunch of stuff. Let's see. There's some end game stuff, and I'm just reading off of what is listed on My Nintendo News as the source. But this is kind of directly off of the Stardew Valley website. So if you ever want to learn more about what's in the content, you just go to StardewValley.net or whatever it is, and look up the patch content notes. They're titling it as the 1.4 content update. So you just read that. It's probably a blog somewhere on their website. And some new endgame stuff. They got, I guess, a new 14 heart event for every spouse. So you can marry and sort of develop a relationship. I don't know if 14 hearts is like 1, 2, 4-ish, whatever, more than what was there. I don't know if they increased the amount. I remember it requiring a lot of hearts to develop a relationship with someone. I just never bothered to count up to 14. But apparently there's some new events that happen with that. New fish in a pond. There's a new map, a new farm map called the Four Corners. I think the farm maps are when you start up the game, it randomizes things. Okay. And so I think the Four Corners is part of that. Let's see here. Four Corners is perfect for the new separate money option in multiplayer. Oh, the game has multiplayer. That was one of the latest content updates. They've been talking about that forever. The game released and they said, "Oh yeah, we're going to do co-op play. Soon. It's coming." And my girlfriend and I waited and waited. I mean, she kept playing it, and I was kind of waiting around. I played a lot of the game, but at some point I was like, I'll get back into it when co-op is in there, and that never came in. And we were looking forward to it. I guess it finally made it in there, but it was like way too late. This game came out during the first year of the Switch.
Yeah, I want to say the first few months it came out.
Probably like September, I think it was in. Okay. Right around that time, and there's a bunch of new items. They got a whole bunch of cosmetic stuff like hairstyles, shirts, hats.
That's crazy.
Pants. Apparently, you can get a Junimo cart.
I don't know what that is.
I don't know what that is either. But there's a lot of stuff in there. So
one thing I do know, a co-op, I could see that helping tremendously. Yeah. There's a lot of things to manage, but it's just way too much work. It feels like when I played that game, it felt like too much work, and I was stressed out all the time.
Part of it is they dangle this automated item or tool in front of you, like you can see it. You can, exactly. You could see it. You can craft it, but to get the material to craft it takes a bit of effort. Right. But it's because it'll give you so much relief and so much free time because it'll automate some tasks that you have to do day in and day out. And then that's part of the charm of those types of games is you finally get this thing that's going to automate this thing, and now you have a new freeing up of time that you can use to like go into the mine and kill some monsters or whatever.
I wish there was more of that because that's I think the aspect that I really liked.
All the games generally have that.
It's just I was stressed out.
Did you ever play what's it called, Graveyard Keeper?
No.
So that's another Harvest Moon Stardew Valley-esque game, but instead of you still have a farm, so you're still growing stuff, but you also are a undertaker / graveyard keeper, and also a what's the term for someone who performs autopsies? I don't know, but you do that as well. So you get bodies. Bodies get delivered to you, and then you have to perform an autopsy on them, and you're extracting like It's a very morbid humor, gallows humor style game.
I actually do remember that because at PAX, right, they had you play the game in a coffin.
That game in a coffin.
Yes.
Brilliant. Yeah. The game has a very awesome sense of humor. Yes. I absolutely love it because when you're taking out the organs of the dead body, you're draining its blood, you're taking out its organs, you're harvesting its fat and stuff like that. You can actually take these things and do various things with it, like create mystery meat that you then sell to the tavern for them to use to make their food with.
That's terrible.
It is terrible, but it's awesome.
Oh, no. I don't like that at all. Yeah. Because I'd potentially be eating that.
Yeah. And that's another game where they have like this big giant tech tree to show you like, here's the stuff that you can make now, and here's the stuff that you can make in the future that's going to make your life so much better, but you got to build all this other stuff in between.
Nope. I'm out. And you know what? I always get those games, and I'm like, this is way too much work. I quit.
Well, I enjoyed that game for the amount that I played, and it could very well be a game that I would want to play even more because it seemed like a Stardew Valley, but shorter. It seemed like the sort of cycle, instead of going through like the 4 seasons to make a year, and you're going through year after year.
Right.
Instead of having that lengthy loop. It felt much shorter where you had some more predefined goals. I don't want to ruin anything storyline-wise, but yeah.
Not for me. All right, and I think... No, this is not the last bit of news. Fairy Tail, we talk about this every time. Finally has a release date.
Yeah, March 19th.
March 19th, 2020? It's about time. All right, moving on. This is a Koei Tecmo, and a lot of people... say Koei Tecmo likes to hide stuff behind not a paywall, but a DLC wall, I guess you could call it. Hopefully they don't do that with that one. That would really disappoint me.
I wouldn't doubt it.
Just kind of hold content back as DLC. That's just a terrible business.
That's fine by me. I don't mind, but the way I'd rather prefer DLC to pay for is to just hold it and put it in one big giant package. Go back to expansion days. Like that's way more cost efficient. It incentivizes more people to buy into it,
right?
Because expansions are typically more worthwhile and expansionary. But if it's little tiny bite-sized DLC things, like no one really cares about this costume or this.
Right, but that's when you're nickel and diming people, and people just don't like that.
No one likes nickel and diming. But if it is an expansion and it shows that the level of effort is there, like I will buy it. Right? Look at Lord of Destruction to Diablo 2. Like, no one plays vanilla Diablo 2. No. Everyone plays Lord of Destruction because they added so much more to it. Every single expansion back in the early 2000s and certainly in the 90s, like, the expansions were very worthwhile. Monster Hunter.
The ability to monetize or a DLC wasn't there, really.
It wasn't. And because they were still doing physical copies. The expansions were physical copies back then, and the advent of digital sales has allowed them the flexibility of being able to nickel and dime. And, Bethesda, speaking of Bethesda, one of the first ones to like really nickel and dime people.
You want this horse armor.
Yeah. But some companies are returned back to expansion level type of content updates, like Monster Hunter Iceborne, right?
Yep.
That's an expansion.
That's a sizable expansion.
It's very sizable. So therefore, to me, very much worthwhile to purchase.
Not worthy of having a slot in the best RPG in the Game Awards. It's an expansion.
No, it wasn't in there.
Did it
get nominated?
It did.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Oh, you're saying it shouldn't be nominated?
It should not be.
Because
it's an expansion.
I'm okay with that. Some expansions are actually substantial enough. I mean, if you're arguing that, then how do you sort of quantify MMOs, bigger, longer lasting things, especially Final Fantasy XIV, which also got nominated, and it's only getting nominated because the game came out years ago.
Right.
But it's only getting nominated because a major expansion
right.
came out.
I don't agree with it.
All right.
Fight me. We'll fight later.
I'm okay with it because that means, man, I'm trying to remember like some of my favorite expansions ever.
Right, but I don't. That game without the original purchase is maybe useless, right? Or do you need the original game?
There are plenty of expansions that are standalone. Look at Torna, the Golden Country.
Can you play that game without
the
Xenoblade Chronicles 2?
Yeah, absolutely. I played the entire game, even though I had Xenoblade Chronicles 2. The game is on a separate cartridge. You could physically buy Torna, the Golden Country.
Okay.
Physically separate.
Okay, fine.
And it's a standalone expansion.
I'll go for that one. I'm not going for Iceborne. You can't change my mind. It's not going to happen. Don't even try. Okay.
Monster Arsenal.
Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel 3 coming to the Switch. Oh my god, people are going absolutely bonkers.
Yep.
For this. So
the Legend of Heroes franchise is a big one, and this third one looks very different. I don't remember Trials of Cold Steel 1 and 2 being as 3D as this one is. Those were more 2D, right? And their combat system and how
I'm waiting for you to teach me.
Teach you. So I don't. the only things I know about it is I watch a lot of people sort of offer their comments about like various different games, and this one sort of came up as like, hey, this is a game this franchise is something that you should pay attention to and care about because it is available on a lot of platforms. It's available on Steam and on PlayStation, and now it's coming to the Switch. And they praise this franchise for its very in-depth, very elaborate story and world.
Right.
Where a lot of the characters that the NPCs, seemingly meaningless NPCs, will actually offer something more than just, hello, how are you? For a conversation. They'll actually like give you something about the world, but only relative to what they understand.
Yeah, right.
So
right.
it makes sense.
They only know what they know, right? That's awesome. And I got to do homework on this. Like I said, I know people absolutely love this game, and I got to do homework on it. I will come better prepared the next time. And one complaint was, all right, so they're bringing in the third iteration of this.
Yeah.
What about 1 and 2? 1 and 2, apparently, you're going to need to know what happens in 1 or 2.
Yeah.
1 and 2.
Typically, I'm okay with jumping into sequels or trequels, whatever, for most games. But RPGs, kind of hard to recommend that. It can be done. But for this series in particular, just by how elaborate the storyline is and how much it connects with prior prequels or prior iterations, it's supposed to carry on a lot with it. And so if it's just releasing the third one and you're not playing the first or the second, that's that, and not having the availability to play the first and second for a very in-depth, elaborate story-based, story-heavy franchise.
So who knows? Will they bring the first two on over? Maybe that's kind of a lesser of a story for them. I don't know. Or will they just do in this third one, all right, here's a recap. Do you want to watch it? Maybe they'll do something like that. I don't know. But that was one of the major complaints was that, all right, we have 3, but we're going to need the other 2, especially for newcomers like myself. So
yeah, now just looking at footage between the first, second, and third, the combat system looks very, very similar. So when it comes to fundamental differences, between those prior iterations and the most up-to-date one, you're not gonna miss much combat-wise, because I mean, it looks like the third one is just taking what was developed on the first and second and adding more to it, or streamlining a bit more, polishing it up, and refining, because this looks almost identical combat system wise to what I saw of the third one.
Yeah, so maybe there won't be a relearning of everything, but story wise it may be a problem.
Yeah.
Okay, and on to the last bit of news, kind of our major talking point for today. We're gonna skip on some Pokemon news. I think that's a little...
Yeah, we don't need to talk about that.
We don't need to talk about no Pokemon.
Nah.
All right, so one thing you mentioned, I think it was last episode, that Final Fantasy isn't an RPG mainly because of the lack of choice. Was that your words?
Yeah, it was player agency, making meaningful choices, and it wasn't all of Final Fantasy as a franchise.
Sure, it was a particular one. It was was it 13?
13 is one I definitely call out as being way too linear of an experience. It's more of a like a movie type of experience rather than a immersive video game experience where you ideally, or in my mind, the ideal RPG rewards the player and offers to the player the ability to influence various elements of the world or of the story or of the characters, the party members that they interact with, etc., to a degree that has some relative significant impact to their play
the growth within the game.
Exactly. And with the Final Fantasy series and a lot of other RPG series do this too, the experience, the way that those RPGs are structured is too linear, meaning that you're always going to get the same storyline delivered to you. You're always going to progress from one area to the next area, whatever those areas may be.
Just the same as everyone else.
In order to drive the next part of the story, in order to make your way towards the end game, whatever that may be. In contrast, now this is in contrast to Fallout New Vegas or Skyrim, games like that, the more Western style RPGs, where you can deviate heavily from the path and do things completely different from what there is no sort of true path, and there is a way.
There's a beginning and an end, and then whatever else you do in between is whatever else you do in between.
Yeah, essentially, you take Breath of the Wild, right? You can beat that game without having to do any of the major great beasts.
Sure.
I forgot what they were called.
I don't know.
The ancient beasts.
The ancients. I don't know.
Whatever those.
We're having a tough time with words today.
Yeah, I know.
Must be the snow.
It's an all thing. It's Thanksgiving. It messes up.
Oh man.
It messes up.
Okay.
But that's what I'm getting at, is that you could explore everything that there is to offer, all the side quests, all of these weird nuanced things, and gain a lot of things, whether it be experience, gear, equipment, abilities, new party members, etc. Or you could just beeline to the thing and
the game.
End the game. Mass Effect, right? Another great game. Now, game that did it both linearly but also non-linearly, where you could miss out on recruiting certain party members. You could make decisions. Now, it was a very linear sort of experience. You're not going to change too much of the beginning, middle, and end core parts of the storyline, but you will augment other parts to the story within the Mass Effect series overall. For example, determining whether certain things, races, characters, whatever, either live or die, and you can make like these bigger, grandiose player agency-based decisions. So
now, would you say that particular style of RPGs is a more of a contemporary, whereas say traditional JRPGs are more stuck in their old ways, and there really is no way to get out of that?
All right, so not all JRPGs are stuck in their own way. I think Xenoblade Chronicles X changes things up. It presents it in a very different structure. It's really an issue of structure, because there's a lot of great things in JRPGs, but there's also a lot of things that are holding it back for the sake of tradition and not wanting to deviate too much from the structure. Final Fantasy 15, right? Huge change, right? They decided to do things a bit different.
Well, you saw that change happening in Final Fantasy 12.
Yeah.
So that's when you kind of, but that's their take on what they westernized their RPGs at that point.
Yep. They did that, but they also did that for Final Fantasy 11. Those two are kind of like very, very close in release. Either 11 came out first or 12 might have come out first. But the combat system, that open world nature of it, they were sort of double teaming the same game design in order to maximize the most development time that they put into it,
right?
Between those two projects. But there's other ones, right? Xenoblade, the original, that one did things very differently, very Western style influence there. So it's really more so JRPGs will be a little bit too rooted in what their comfort, right? They get a little bit too comfortable. This happened to the Tales franchise in a very, very bad way, where Tales of what was the one after Vesperia moved things into a very lackluster type of way where it felt formulaic. And once again, all of the Tales games, you do not have any major change in the storyline. There's nothing significant that can happen. The last one that I can remember there being a significant change up of either party members or storyline is Tales of Symphonia.
And that's what, PS...
That's a GameCube game.
That's a GameCube game?
Yeah,
it was on a PlayStation?
It released on GameCube first.
Okay.
Yeah. And that one you could choose between a certain party member living or dying.
Okay.
In that one.
And that had a major impact on story?
Well, that party member, yeah, you either have or don't have that particular party member.
But that was their last real
it was more
deviation?
So between two different party members, and you're sort of picking and choosing between the two. But yeah, I'm trying to remember like whether any other Tales game within that franchise had something even remotely close to that level of decision that would impact the story in a relatively significant way. And I can't really think of them. I've played a lot of the Tales games. I didn't play them all, but I played a lot of them. One of the worst ones I played through and beat, which was super linear, is Tales of Symphonia 2, which was on the Wii. That was a terrible game. It had only co-op for multiplayer. I mean, thankfully, the Tales combat system was great, but it was great on Tales of Symphonia and Tales of Abyss, and they pretty much did not really change up the formula all that much. They didn't need to, but they also got very comfortable. And the structure of those Tales games, very linear. Yes, some of them did have an open world to explore, but it was always gated by the next scene, the next sort of NPC they have to initiate a conversation with in order to make the story progress to the next thing. So it was always structured the same. It was it's very linear structure in a world that sort of gave you think of it like I don't know, like a diamond thing where you had like this little focal point where you start, and then things sort of widen up. You got like a little bit of flow area, and then it sort of constricts you back to a center point where you cannot progress any further until you sort of initiate that NPC quest or go through that dungeon or something like that.
Okay.
And Tales of Symphonia didn't have the open world. Symphonia 2 didn't have the open world. You actually had to you had like a map, and you just select the next point in the map they want to go to. So it was like very non-linear style game. And there's plenty of other games out there that do that. The World Ends With You. As much as I love that game, that was also a very, very linear game. There was no open world experience.
See that with Pokemon. They've been doing it for almost 30 years.
Yeah, Pokemon. I mean, you are going from point A to point B. There isn't really an opportunity to deviate from a certain path. You can't go out of sequence on things. Take a lot of the Zelda games, like Skyward Sword or Twilight Princess, or the sailing one.
The sailing Wind Waker?
Wind Waker. Oh, man. These names are escaping me. But those are all very linear experiences.
But those are not RPGs. Thank you.
I mean, what I'm trying to say is,
sure, no,
and this falls in line with Japanese developed games and stuff like that. They get very comfortable.
They do get very comfortable. And the real reason why I brought this up, because there's an article on Vice. I will link that in all descriptions. And their talking point is from a podcast that they do.
Yep.
Their talking point was, with this tabletop RPG renaissance, whatever it is we're seeing right now with all these different tabletop RPGs, should the video game RPGs be taking note and basically start implementing some of their design choices, some of the way they are doing things. So basically, there was a really good quote. We'll go here where Rob, I was getting into conversation with Emmanuel. I'm not sure who either of these people are, about the encumbrance and how many games deploy it and why sometimes it totally feels pointless.
Yep.
And other times the game wouldn't be the same without it, but it got me thinking about how so much of what informs your bog standard RPG goes back to RPG systems like Dungeons and Dragons or GURPS. I've
never heard of GURPS.
I've never heard of GURPS.
I probably experienced GURPS a whole lot, but I'd never heard the term GURPS.
So there's the basics. One of your basic things. Some tabletop RPGs, there's no encumbrance. There's none of that.
Yeah.
And some of that stuff is brought over in the olden days for CRPGs, brought there and then just never left. Things like that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these games are just including these elements from traditional games or just other video games that have done things, or tabletop games that have done these things. And because everyone's copying everyone, because the people that they're copying, typically you want to copy the successful ones. And because they did it, you think that, oh, they did it, they're successful, we should do it. In order for us to be successful, right? Take the Elder Scrolls games. They have encumbrance. And
have you ever had that one item you're like, I can't get rid of anything?
Yeah.
And you traverse the entire map just encumbered. Whatever.
That is Fallout.
Yep.
That's like that. The whole Elder Scrolls and Fallout games just have that. And it used to be, if it wasn't encumbrance through like weight of items, then it's encumbrance by sheer number of available inventory slots.
Right. So Resident Evil kind of does that a little bit with where you kind of fit it in on a grid.
But for Resident Evil, they did it in a very meaningful way where they purposely wanted to restrict how much resources you had available to you and make that type of decision making very important. Now, it's bothersome because it gets in the way of the puzzle items that you have to also carry around with you. So you're competing with your survival item inventory slots, and the items that you need to carry with you because it's the key to this one place.
The next area opening up.
And the fact that those two things compete on inventory slots is a problem, but the idea of encumbrance and limited item slots, inventory space, etc., the idea of it is fine. It just has to, developers should rethink these things and rethink them in a way that, should we do it the way that all these other places did? Maybe they never fully thought out, how to do it or do it well or do it better than the prior person. They really should rethink these things. One thing that irks me about just RPGs, things that people should drop, is the whole strength, wisdom, intelligence, you don't like that at all. Stats, it's completely pointless. You can hide that entirely from the user because none of it is actually tied into the fundamental mechanics of what dictates your damage, the number of attacks you make, or like the actual core elements of the combat system. HP does.
I disagree totally.
They influence it. They absolutely influence it, but I'm not talking about that. I don't care that my strength went up by 5. What I care about is the amount my damage went up by, not my strength.
But if your strength modifier is what indicates your damage output.
Indirectly, though, that's what I'm getting at. It's the indirect nature of it, and it requires some calculation either on your part or, thankfully, in most modern games, they show it for you already. But at that point, why even show it? All I care about, and Diablo 4 has been doing this, and I think in Diablo 3 they start to head towards that direction, because
they just show the damage output and nothing
exactly, because that's all that matters. Just give me the final numbers, because those are the numbers that I'm going to be basing a lot of my decisions off of, right? Mm-hmm. Or eventually doing the math to figure out those are the final numbers I'm going to be basing my decisions
So maybe if
of.
they do something where it's a strength, intelligence, wisdom, all that type of stuff, maybe strength should not only just modify your damage output, maybe it should modify something else.
Well, there's plenty of other games that do have core stats of whatever they are, mm-hmm. and have those core stats influence multiple things. Take Fire Emblem, right? Where your strength not only affects your physical damage, but it also affects your carrying capacity. There is a weight system,
right? Encumbrance or whatever.
It's kind of hidden in Fire Emblem. It's not. It's there.
But you never really run into problems, though. I've never never run into it.
Oh yeah, it's a big thing. So
okay, maybe in your play
they just don't show it to you.
Okay.
If you ever wonder why sometimes with some weapons you can attack twice and sometimes you can't attack twice, it's because of the weight difference.
Okay.
And that weight difference comes into play depending on your strength. The higher strength you have, the more weight you can actually, the heavier weapons you can actually leverage.
But that leveling is all done either not automatically and randomly as well. So you're not doing any of that.
No, it is, but all right.
I mean, you have ways of manipulating it,
right? But that's a different sort of beast altogether. I just want to use Fire Emblem as an example to show that there are already games that will have dual purposes for a singular stat.
Right.
I mean, a lot of the Bethesda games have that too,
and that's where it matters, I think.
Yeah. So, where were we?
Oh well, you were spouting off some.
Yeah. So physical damage. All I really care about is the physical damage, and then like intelligence. I don't care about intelligence. I just care about the magical damage that it's going to do. And then even with those two things being different stats, all I really care about is how much damage I'm going to deal to the enemy afterwards. Now I know there is a difference when it comes to like damage typing, and that is fairly significant, but developers they don't need to sort of remove as much of the abstract, as I would like to call them, the abstract stats like strength, intelligence, charisma, etc., and just give me the concrete stats. They don't have to remove all the abstract ones, but they should certainly rethink the purpose of abstract stats and get closer towards concrete stats, what the player actually is going to use and what the player actually cares about. Because once you get down to that level of stuff, you can create newer stat lines and newer sort of statistical things that the player can play around with. And because it's new, it's different. Mm-hmm. It's a different way of thinking about combat, where I'm thinking about combat in terms of attacks per second instead of combat in terms of, is my strength high enough? Is my dexterity high enough? Is my chance to hit high enough? I don't really care about those things. But if I'm getting like, oh, wow, this new weapon is giving me 3 attacks in a second versus this other weapon that's only giving me 2 attacks in a second, that's great. Right. I can, that's a cool stat to work with.
Right. You can figure that out.
Right. Well, it's also, you take that and then you take the base damage, right? I don't care about, it increases my strength by 5. What's that mean in damage, right? I have to apply this formulaic thing, like it scales exponentially, logarithmic, whatever it is, and all the various ways that games can do it.
Well, they're doing it for you. You don't have to figure that out.
Just give me just a solid damage number, and then I can say, oh, I'm getting 3 attacks a second with this dagger, and it's giving me 5 damage per attack. Great. I know exactly how much damage I'm going to do.
Sure.
And when it comes to attacks, now damage, right? That's pretty standard, right? Nothing special there. But when it comes to like attacks per second, that can be interesting to the player because now you open up the mechanic of applying an effect per attack.
Right.
And now having higher or lower attacks per second definitely gives you something nuanced to think about in a very meaningful way because it'll tie into how many times you can proc something on a particular attack chance or whatever. Those are the cool stats. When I played WoW way back when, right? That was a thing you worried about was your attacks per second. How many times you could proc something per second, per minute, or whatever. Those were the numbers that you were crunching. What was my crit percentage? What was my chance to hit percentage? Not what was my strength? What was my dex? What was my agility?
I mean, all what you've just said is all well and good.
Yep.
For Western RPGs. Now, if you get your traditional JRPG turn-based, you can't really use something like DPS, or you can use crit chance and crit damage. You can definitely use that.
Well, yeah, it depends. It depends on the game and the combat system, right? If it's a turn-based game, then yeah, your attacks per second don't matter, right? It's not real time. You're doing a turn-based game, but that's what I'm getting at. Like, rethink the core abstract base stats. Rethink those. Those aren't needed anymore. They can be, dare I say, obsolete. Or made obsolete in favor of something better. It doesn't have to be 100% of the time. I'm not saying every game should do this.
Right.
But why not rethink the base core stats? Why not rethink them in a way that is more interesting to the player? For example, like Bait and Kados, right? Your leveling up wasn't like increasing your stats. Yes, there are stats, but something that was a more meaningful stat to play around with and increase as you leveled up was leveling up your deck, right? Getting cards that were of a higher level, getting new cards, getting access to more cards that you made up the deck that you're actually using in the combat system, right? It wasn't just, this weapon gives me 5 more strength versus this weapon, etc. Like in this abstract, what does strength actually do for my character? Like, it got rid of those things because when I got a card to add to my deck, I knew exactly what that meant. I had access to whatever that card's new ability was, whatever it did. I had access to that, and it would be added to my deck, and I had to weigh the choice of adding it to my deck, thinning it out for the chances of getting everything else, but also weighing that with the benefits that one single card would add to my deck. So that was a cool stat to play with because it was different.
Right. And harking back to the original talking point where I guess we call it a renaissance. I don't know what to call it, but their tabletop games have become much more than just D&D and wizardry and all these. They've become very popular right now for whatever reason, and there are just a lot of new, refreshing ideas.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of the crux of the article. Is like they want to see the refreshment. They want to see these new ideas take place in RPGs. Yeah. They said more specifically CRPGs, but I don't know that you can get away with, say, for example, like Pillars of Eternity, Divinity Original Sin. Can you get away with?
Absolutely.
You could?
In Divinity, so you don't have to get away from certain things, but there are certain things that can be dropped. Entirely, like encumbrance.
Wait a minute.
And Divinity had that.
I know,
it didn't need it.
But just be careful about when you talk about Divinity Original Sin 2 in front of me. Okay, all right, go ahead.
Look, I love that game too. Probably. I mean, it's certainly not as much as you.
No, it's fine. No, I mean, encumbrance. I guess it doesn't matter.
Well, here's one of the major things that Divinity did that was very interesting. It added in the whole sort of exploit the terrain. As a combat mechanic, and being able to sort of lay down some new terrain type onto the battlefield, and then to have that influence things that happen turns later, rounds later, whatever. It also added in the relationship system.
Yeah.
And the decisions that you made role-playing wise, this is one of the cooler ones that I actually really liked, was depending on the decisions you make as you interact with NPCs, you would what was it, like personality or trait would deviate from one side to another. Are you more of a charming person or a coarse?
Yeah, I felt it really mattered. And some of the dialogue choices, obviously, and some of the other choices that you've made previously. A lot of the choices matter, whether or not the outcome is the same, because inevitably it is the same. Just how you get there is always very, very different.
Yeah, and the benefits that it gave you weren't really that interesting. They were certainly useful, but they weren't really that interesting because they were just passive increases to things that you already had access to, more or less. They didn't unlock new abilities. They gave you like additional stats or additional points into a particular skill, like making it +1 higher or -1, etc. But being able to have your role-playing influence and the decisions that you made while role-playing influence other parts of the game, like the combat or like your ability to lockpick or whatever it is, that was cool.
Yeah.
That was a very new, different way of doing things, and certainly appreciated.
You feel like the freedom is there. Like you can just do whatever you want. And I think that's what they're reaching out for, is like, I want to be able to do whatever I want. I want this to actually be a true, legitimate tabletop RPG where the story is told, right then and there, basically.
Yeah. And here's a great example of kind of what I'm talking about, and that is Paper Mario 2, Thousand Year Door. That game didn't have strength. It didn't have agility. It didn't have intelligence, right? No. It didn't have these abstract stats, but you still leveled up. And what were you gaining when you leveled up? Well, you gained HP. I still think HP is great. It's a good thing, right? I'm not.
You're not knocking that.
I'm not knocking HP. It had I think it was flower points or whatever the mana system was. I think it was in flowers. FP. Just like HP, but a different pool, a different resource pool to tap into. Made perfect sense to me.
Sure.
Right?
Fits that universe.
And then it was your attack damage, and it would only go up, potentially, by 1.
That's it.
And even if that, and it was more so tied to the gear you get, and it would always be, I think when it came to HP and FP, I think FP was probably an increase of 3. That's it, just 3.
Small incremental.
HP was an increase of 5. And anytime your damage would go up for, I think they separated it between your hammer attacks and your jump attacks. The damage go up by 1. It was like miniature, but your damage would start at 1 for everything.
Mm-hmm.
So then when you finally leveled up your boots to jump on your jump-based abilities, it went from 1 damage to 2 damage. And that was substantial and meaningful. And it definitely gave your character a major bump up from the older, lower level stuff to the stuff that you're encountering now. And that 1 extra damage made a difference when you're coming across armored enemies, because they would negate that damage by 1.
Right.
It was such a great, simple, very, very simple, but such a great, simple, and balanced system to fundamental RPG stat lines.
Right.
Where they didn't give you like 100 strength, 1,000 strength, like Diablo 3 has, like these ridiculous numbers where you're doing like 1.8 million damage.
I think people just like to see, flashy numbers on the screen. That's a lot of what that is.
But they don't need to do that. And in my opinion, it gets in the way, right? Why not just make very small, easily digestible numbers for the players to play with? Obviously curve them when you need to curve them in order to sort of balance things out for those reasons, but don't make it escalate. Don't make it start at like 100 and have it escalate all the way into the thousands and have your damage go from like 10 damage per attack to millions damage per attack. Like, that is insane. Like,
right.
Like, that kind of scale factor is just absolutely ridiculous and is pointless when you have a game like Paper Mario 2, one of the best RPGs out there. starts at 1 damage per attack, and it works.
It does work.
It works perfectly. This Goomba has 2 HP. I have to jump on it twice. Boom. They actually made hit points actually hit. You know, count the number of times you have to hit them, like actual hit points.
I think, and again, this is what that, for example, that game is very typical of what Nintendo does. They like to make their games more accessible. Yeah. So that's really kind of to get a younger audience into RPGs.
Yeah.
And that's probably why they kept it so simple, well, simplistic.
Simple, but then they layered on more nuances to the combat system. They opened up more things. They gave you more star powers that you could choose from.
Sure.
They further delved into sort of building up the audience participation when you're doing those stage battles, which are still an awesome mechanic that they haven't done.
I would love to see a remake
to this day,
of that, but
or like a true sequel to that game, because that game was just amazing, especially its combat system. It was simplistic, but it was very it was easy to predict what would happen, but there was still the element of randomness in there to make it exciting. But you knew what the outcomes would be once you learned what to expect. Right, Mario's always going to do that 1 damage, right, on his jump or whatever. If you hit the timing on the button right, you'll get 2 damage instead of 1 damage, right? Like, you knew what the outcome was be. It was just a matter of execution on your part.
Right. Yeah, I agree. So yeah, what do you guys think about this? Do RPGs need some sort of a renaissance? Do we need some sort of new flavor?
Always. I think we always need new stuff.
Yeah, I think it's always refreshing. You know, when you get that one game that does something different, and it's like, wow.
You know, they should take the sanity system of Eternal Darkness and roll that into an RPG.
No, I don't. Okay,
they already did that.
I don't want
Darkest Dungeon.
I don't want clones of games. I want just new, refreshing ideas.
I'm not talking about a clone. I'm not saying Eternal Darkness 2. I'm talking, take mechanics that are like completely outside of the RPG realm and bake them into an RPG.
A new, altogether RPG. Sure.
Yeah.
Like you had just mentioned, Darkest Dungeon and the Sanity.
It did that. Yeah. It has. I think it was called Sanity. But yeah, your characters would... Oh, no, it was Stress. And when the stress built up so high, they would develop some sort of... They would become slightly insane by developing some sort of... I forgot what the drawback was, but some sort of...
So, permanent drawback.
Yeah. I forgot what it was called. Like, they could become a masochist, or they could get some other things happen to them. That was just great, and it further impacts
except
things
if it was like your favorite character.
No, look.
When you can't have favorite characters.
When you're going into Darkest Dungeon, you got to know what you're getting yourself into.
Right. Oh, man. So that is our kind of a news segment. Like I said, what do you guys think of this? Do we need a new renaissance here? So we have no listener questions this week. I really didn't promote that all too well, mostly because I knew that we'd be getting into it with this last discussion. Yeah. So some new upcoming RPGs coming this week. We have Wizards of Brandel. I think that's a Kemco game. Star Ocean First Departure R. I might be getting this.
I am definitely going to pull up a video on this because Star Ocean. Correct me if I'm wrong. I could be thinking of Lunar. Is Star Ocean a action-based combat system?
It is not. It is a turn-based game, so you're not getting it.
All right. No, I really like turn-based ones too. But okay, I was confusing it with Lunar.
Yeah, no, I don't know. It depends on where I'm at with Children of Morta. I may get this. So that is December 5th, along with I don't know if I mentioned it, Wizards.
Whoa.
I'm sorry. Did you say something?
I was right. I just want to point out.
It is action?
It is. I'm looking at a trailer right now. Star Ocean is very much an action-based combat system.
My apologies.
Oh, my God. So this and that action combat system, it looks like it's like Tales style.
So within like an arena sort of thing.
Yeah, side-scroll Tales. Like,
okay. I'm so sorry.
Man.
I'm
this excites me. This actually looks good.
I apologize 1,000 times.
You know, I could be wrong, though. That could just be a very action-heavy turn-based combat system. I still don't know for certain, but it looks very action-y.
Either way, it looks like it's something I'd be into.
Yeah.
So yeah, Star Ocean Departure R. Then we have December 6th, Immortal Planet. I actually did play a little bit of this.
Yeah, I played a lot of it.
It is, it's got the progression of Dark Souls, where you, I guess, I mean,
It has the combat system of Dark Souls.
where there's some sort of dodge and you have to learn the enemy movements, that sort of thing. But it's done
slower, heavier.
Yeah, it's done isometrically, and the aesthetic or the look of it is very. How would you describe that?
The art style, it's an isometric sort of perspective. It's an action combat system.
Yep.
So it kind of looks like a Diablo-y style viewpoint, but it's not as action intensive heavy as those games. It's more slower, nuanced, like
It is very slow,
like Dark Souls.
I believe it feel like it's very slow. It's a lot slower. At least I got up to the first boss.
Yeah, and in the areas themselves, they don't really change up all that much. It's very bland,
Right.
and simplistic on the environments that you're going through. You're, man, it's been a while since I played this game, but you are like a robot champion dude.
Yeah, there were a few, it was a robot, but there were a few different variations of that.
And you land on, or you're going through these planets or one planet with multiple areas to explore, and it has something to do with the gods or whatever. But basically, you're just going from one area to another, killing the boss. And you move on to the next area. It is slightly open world-ish, but in the wrong ways. It's a bunch of rooms that are connected to
I wouldn't say it's open world,
but you do have to backtrack. That's why I'm mentioning it's open world-ish. There's a lot of backtrack involved. There's some degree of puzzle solving, some degree of platforming in there. But it's an isometric game, so don't expect too much for the platforming or from the puzzle solving. There are some like elements of like hidden platforms and stuff like that in there. The combat's all right. It's an okay game.
I would say it's an okay game.
Yeah, I actually reviewed the game on the Geek Down.
I didn't read it. So moving on. Moving on, we have Assassin's Creed: The Rebel Collection. Not much of an Assassin's Creed fan myself. I think I played the first one. I don't even remember playing it.
But this is I played the second one and I never beat it. And that's as far as I got with Assassin's Creed.
Yep, same with me. It became some sort of like it became serialized. So every year there was a new Assassin's Creed.
Too many.
Yeah.
The twos of the Assassin's Creeds were just terrible because it was like Brotherhood and whatever the one after that one was.
From what I hear, Black Flag is probably the one to play.
Well, Odyssey is definitely the one to play because that is just full.
That's the most recent. Right.
Well, Odyssey and Origin are like full-blown RPGs.
Okay.
Like an action-based RPG. Odyssey is the most recent one. Very RPG intensive. Actually, you can play it on Switch in Japan.
In Japan. All right. Well,
they stream it. So you have to get a streaming service. Yeah.
Okay. So that may make it difficult to just have an account here. I don't know. I mean, I have a Japanese account.
If you lived on like the West Coast of the United States.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be just
because proximity to the servers is a big deal.
That'd be a problem. Yeah, that's why Google Stadia is in a big mess as well. But then we have December 7th, Ashen. Ashen is a pretty interesting game. I know several people that are very interested in that title. It looks like you're pulling up some vidya, maybe
trying to.
And then I'm not familiar with these other two here. Riftkeeper. Did you put these on here?
I did put those on there. Riftkeeper actually does look a little interesting. And I got those from the Nintendo eShop.
Okay.
I was just looking at what games were coming out and looking at which ones look like RPGs.
Oh, okay. So these aren't coming out like within a week or so. These are coming out at some point.
No, they are coming out within the next week.
Oh, okay.
Week or two. I think the furthest out is like 2 weeks away.
So Riftkeeper is a roguelike or light, I believe.
Yeah. So it's side scroll action. I don't know. I kind of got like Darkest Dungeon
Don't tell me
not Darkest Dungeon.
Salt and Sanctuary-esque.
No,
because I will punch that game in the face.
We talked about earlier, Dead Cells. That was the game I actually mentioned. I get Dead Cells vibes from this particular game, and you can kind of see here.
Sure,
right?
yeah.
I mean, this looks. It's not slow.
No, it's a little reminiscent of Castlevania. Looks, anyways.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I would say Castlevania, the Game Boy Advance style ones. It's pixelated artwork. It looks interesting. It looks pretty solid, right? It's platforming. It's 2D side scroll platformer. Going around this big giant environments. There are enemies littered throughout this dungeony environment, and you're attacking them with various attacks. Damage numbers show up. They drop loot. I mean, it's Castlevania or more recent Dead Cells. It's showing off elements of that. So.
Yep. Yeah.
And definitely Dead Cells. I mean, if you like Dead Cells, this one could
be right up your alley.
Could be right up your alley. I don't think it'll be as good as Dead Cells because Dead Cells is phenomenal, but this looks good.
Cool. And the other title you had on here was Regions of Ruin.
Yeah, Regions of Ruin. I just wanted to mention it. It's coming out soon. It's like a Terraria.
Okay.
Yeah. So it looked like that, except with dwarves, I think.
Dwarves. Nice. Excellent. So that is what's coming out very soon, and that's going to do it for today.
Oh yeah,
this has been quite an action-packed episode. So thank you so much for listening, and thank you to everyone who sent in their questions. There were no questions. Why do I continue to read this verbatim? Keep them coming. Remember, you can listen to the show each and every week at switchrpg.com, or you can subscribe on your favorite podcast app. If you listen on an app, please give us a rating and review. We want to climb up the charts on those platforms. So your support would be amazing. And finally, remember you can head over to switchrpg.com for all your RPG needs for the Nintendo Switch. Until next time, see you around.